In the heart of the Arabian Peninsula lies a secret that has remained hidden for centuries: ancient tombs carved into rose-colored cliffs, mysterious inscriptions that predate Christ, and archaeological discoveries that are rewriting human history. When the future King of England stepped off his plane into the Saudi Arabian desert, he wasn't just embarking on another royal visit. He was about to witness one of the most significant cultural revelations of the 21st century, one that would forever change how the world views the crossroads between East and West. The morning sun cast long shadows across the tarmac at AlUla's newly constructed airport as Prince William emerged from the Royal Air Force aircraft. The desert air carried with it something different, not just the familiar warmth of the Middle Eastern climate he had experienced during previous diplomatic missions, but an almost palpable sense of anticipation. Today marked the beginning of what royal advisors had quietly described as one of the most culturally significant visits in recent British-Saudi relations. Prince William adjusted his lightweight blazer, chosen specifically for the desert climate, and surveyed the landscape stretching before him. The red sandstone mountains of AlUla rose majestically in the distance, their ancient faces weathered by millennia of wind and rain into shapes that seemed almost deliberately crafted by master sculptors. This was not the Saudi Arabia that most of the world knew, not the bustling cities of Riyadh or Jeddah, not the oil fields that had transformed the kingdom into a global economic powerhouse. This was something far older, far more mysterious. The royal convoy moved slowly through the desert landscape, allowing Prince William his first glimpse of the archaeological wonders that had drawn him to this remote corner of the kingdom. Through the bulletproof windows of his vehicle, he watched as the landscape transformed from flat desert plains into a dramatic canyon system, where massive rock formations created natural corridors that had served as highways for ancient civilizations. Dr. Forward. Rebecca Martinez, the British archaeological consultant who had been instrumental in arranging this visit, sat beside the prince. Her enthusiasm barely contained as she prepared to share discoveries that had taken her team nearly 5 years to fully understand. She had been part of the international team working to uncover AlUla's secrets since the Saudi government had opened the region to serious archaeological investigation as part of their Vision 23 initiative. The first stop was the Visitor Center, a modern architectural marvel that had been designed to blend seamlessly with the surrounding landscape. The building itself told a story, constructed using local materials and traditional techniques, yet equipped with the most advanced climate control systems to protect the priceless artifacts housed within. Prince William was immediately struck by the way the structure seemed to emerge from the desert floor itself, as if it had been waiting there for centuries. Inside, the prince was introduced to Dr. Ahmed al-Rashid, the Saudi archaeologist who had become something of a legend in academic circles for his groundbreaking work in the region. Dr. al-Rashid's weathered face and intense eyes spoke of decades spent under the desert sun, carefully brushing sand away from artifacts that had not seen daylight since the time of Christ. The briefing room contained detailed maps and 3D models of the archaeological sites they would visit over the next 3 days. Prince William leaned forward intently as Dr. Jock al-Rashid began explaining the significance of what they had discovered. AlUla, he learned, had been a crucial stop along the ancient incense trade routes that connected the Arabian Peninsula with the Mediterranean world. For over 1,000 years, caravans carrying precious frankincense, myrrh, and spices had stopped here to rest, trade, and resupply. But it was not just the commercial significance that made AlUla special. The region had been home to the Nabateans, the same sophisticated civilization that had carved the magnificent city of Petra in neighboring Jordan. Here in AlUla, they had created something equally spectacular but far less known to the modern world: a necropolis of tombs carved directly into the cliff faces, each one a masterpiece of ancient engineering and artistry. Prince William studied the photographs of these tombs, his expression growing more amazed with each image. The facades were incredibly detailed, featuring elaborate geometric patterns, carved columns, and inscriptions in ancient scripts that scholars were still working to fully decipher. Some of the tombs were massive, clearly designed for individuals of great importance, while others were smaller, but no less beautifully crafted. Dr. Martinez explained that what made the AlUla discoveries so significant was their state of preservation. Unlike many archaeological sites in the Middle East, AlUla had been largely protected from both human interference and natural disasters. The dry climate had acted as a natural preservative, keeping not just the stone carvings intact, but also organic materials like textiles, wooden artifacts, and even ancient documents written on leather and papyrus. The prince learned that the site had been continuously inhabited for over 7,000 years, with each civilization leaving its mark on the landscape. There were prehistoric petroglyphs showing hunting scenes and early religious ceremonies, Nabatean tombs and inscriptions, early Islamic settlements, and even Ottoman-era structures. It was like a textbook of human civilization written in stone and sand. As they prepared to venture out into the archaeological sites themselves, Prince William was fitted with protective gear, not the heavy equipment one might expect in a war zone, but the careful clothing and tools needed to protect both the visitor and the precious archaeological remains from contamination. Every surface they would touch, every area they would walk through, had been carefully prepared to ensure that their visit would not damage artifacts that had survived for millennia. The first site they visited was Jabal Ikma, known to researchers as an open library of ancient inscriptions. The prince found himself standing before cliff faces covered with hundreds of inscriptions in multiple languages and scripts: Nabatean, Arabic, Aramaic, and others that scholars were still working to identify. Dr. Al-Rashid pointed out inscriptions that appeared to be ancient graffiti left by travelers, official proclamations, religious invocations, and what appeared to be early forms of poetry. Prince William was particularly fascinated by one inscription that Dr. Martinez had been studying for months. It appeared to be a prayer or blessing for safe travel, written by a merchant who had passed through AlUla nearly 2,000 years ago. The human connection across such a vast span of time was almost overwhelming. Here was a man, probably not so different from people today, asking for protection on his journey through the dangerous desert routes. The preservation of these inscriptions was remarkable. In many cases, the text was so clear that it looked as though it could have been carved yesterday. Dr. Al-Rashid explained that the particular composition of the sandstone, combined with the extremely dry climate, had created perfect conditions for preservation. However, he also noted with some urgency that climate change and increased tourism could potentially threaten these irreplaceable historical records. As the day progressed, Prince William's understanding of the region's significance continued to deepen. This was not just an archaeological site, it was a window into a crucial period of human history, when the ancient world was becoming connected through trade, cultural exchange, and the sharing of ideas. The artifacts they were seeing represented not just Saudi Arabian heritage, but the heritage of human civilization itself. The prince was shown pottery fragments from Greece and Rome, beads from India, silk that had traveled from China, and spices from the distant islands of Southeast Asia. All of these had passed through AlUla, carried by the merchant caravans that had made this remote desert location one of the most cosmopolitan places in the ancient world. It was a powerful reminder that globalization was not a modern invention, but something that had been happening for thousands of years. During a break in the tour, Prince William had the opportunity to speak privately with some of the international team of researchers working on the site. He was struck by their passion and dedication, but also by the challenges they faced. Funding for archaeological research was always limited, and the scale of the discoveries at AlUla meant that there was far more work to be done than could be accomplished with current resources. Martinez explained that they estimated less than 5% of the archaeological sites in the AlUla region had been properly excavated and studied. Ground-penetrating radar and satellite imagery suggested that there were dozens, perhaps hundreds, of significant sites still waiting to be explored. Each one could potentially revolutionize understanding of ancient Arabian civilization and its connections to the broader ancient world. The prince also learned about the delicate balance between archaeological preservation and tourism development. The Saudi government's Vision 2030 plan called for AlUla to become a major tourist destination, which would bring much-needed funding for archaeological research, but also posed risks to the fragile ancient sites. The challenge was to develop sustainable tourism that would allow people from around the world to experience these wonders while ensuring their protection for future generations. As the sun began to set over the dramatic landscape, painting the red sandstone cliffs in even deeper shades of crimson and gold, Prince William reflected on the day's discoveries. He had come to AlUla expecting to fulfill a diplomatic obligation and demonstrate British support for Saudi Arabia's cultural development initiatives. Instead, he found himself genuinely moved by the human stories preserved in stone and sand. The evening concluded with a traditional Saudi meal served under the stars, with the ancient tombs of Hegra visible in the distance. Local musicians performed traditional songs that had been passed down through generations, some of which, the prince was told, could trace their melodies back to the time when AlUla was a bustling center of international trade. Sitting there in the desert night, surrounded by the evidence of ancient civilizations, Prince William began to understand why this visit had been described as potentially transformational. This was not just about British-Saudi relations, though those were certainly important. This was about humanity's shared heritage and the responsibility that all nations had to protect and preserve the irreplaceable records of human history. The stars above AlUla that night were the same stars that had guided ancient merchants along the incense routes. The same constellations that had watched over the Nabatean craftsmen as they carved their masterpieces into the cliff faces. As Prince William prepared to retire to his desert camp, he knew that tomorrow would bring even more remarkable discoveries and a deeper understanding of this extraordinary place, where past and present seemed to exist simultaneously. The second day of Prince William's visit to AlUla began before dawn, as the royal party prepared to witness something that few people in the modern world had ever seen: sunrise over the ancient necropolis of Hagra. The pre-dawn desert was surprisingly cool, and the prince wrapped a traditional Saudi cloak around his shoulders as he was driven through the darkness toward what would prove to be the most emotionally powerful part of his entire visit. Hagra, also known as Madain Salih, represented the southern capital of the Nabatean kingdom, the same civilization that had built Petra. But while Petra had been carved from rose-red cliffs, Hagra emerged from golden sandstone, creating a different but equally breathtaking architectural achievement. As the convoy approached the site in the pre-dawn darkness, powerful floodlights illuminated the tomb facades, creating an almost supernatural atmosphere that took Prince William's breath away. Dr. Sarah Thompson, a British conservationist who had been working on the site for 3 years, met the prince at the entrance to the archaeological zone. She explained that they had arranged for this early morning visit specifically to allow him to experience the tombs as they would have been seen by ancient visitors, in the soft golden light of sunrise that revealed every detail of the intricate carvings. The first tomb they approached was known as the tomb of Liyan, son of Khuzar, one of the most magnificent examples of Nabatean architecture anywhere in the world. The facade stood nearly 50 feet high, carved entirely from a single piece of sandstone, with such precision that the joints between different architectural elements were virtually invisible. As the sun crested the horizon, the tomb seemed to come alive, with shadows dancing across carved columns, cornices, and decorative elements that revealed the incredible skill of ancient craftsmen. Prince William stood in silence for several minutes, clearly moved by the majesty of what he was seeing. Dr. Thompson explained that this tomb had been created for a wealthy merchant or possibly a minor royal sometime in the 1st century CE. The inscriptions around the entrance provided not just the name of the occupant, but warnings against disturbing the tomb and prayers for the peaceful rest of the deceased. What made the experience even more powerful was the realization that Prince William was standing in almost exactly the same spot where ancient mourners had gathered for funeral ceremonies nearly 2,000 years ago. Archaeological evidence suggested that the Nabateans had held elaborate funeral processions and burial rituals at these sites, with families traveling from great distances to honor their dead in these magnificent tombs. As they moved deeper into the necropolis, Dr. Thompson pointed out the incredible variety of tomb designs. Some featured classical Greek and Roman architectural elements, reflecting the Nabateans' connections to the Mediterranean world. Others incorporated distinctly Arabian motifs, showing how this civilization had successfully blended influences from multiple cultures to create something uniquely their own. The prince was particularly fascinated by the engineering challenges that the tomb builders had overcome. Many of the tombs were carved into cliff faces that were hundreds of feet high, requiring the ancient workers to develop sophisticated scaffolding and rope systems. The precision of the carving was remarkable. Geometric patterns that had to be perfect across dozens of feet of stone, carved entirely by hand with simple tools. Dr. Thompson showed Prince William evidence of the techniques used by Nabatean stoneworkers. Tool marks were still visible in some areas, and researchers had been able to reconstruct many of the methods used. The work had been incredibly labor-intensive, with some of the larger tombs requiring years to complete. This suggested a highly organized society with the resources to support long-term construction projects and skilled craftsmen who could be dedicated to such work. One of the most remarkable discoveries at Hagra had been the preservation of organic materials inside some of the tombs. The extremely dry climate had acted as a natural preservation system, keeping textiles, leather goods, wooden artifacts, and even food remains intact for nearly 2 millennia. Prince William was shown some of these artifacts in a temporary conservation laboratory that had been set up on site. Among the preserved items were fragments of silk that had clearly come from China, proving the extent of the trade networks that the Nabateans had been part of. There were also examples of their own textile production. Wool and linen fabrics dyed with colors that were still vibrant after all these centuries. The quality of the weaving and dyeing showed that Nabatean society had included highly skilled artisans working in many different crafts. The prince was also shown examples of Nabatean pottery, which revealed surprising sophistication in both practical and decorative ceramics. Some pieces were clearly designed for everyday use: water jugs, storage containers, and cooking vessels. Others were purely decorative, featuring intricate geometric patterns and even figural decorations that showed clear artistic vision and skill. Perhaps most remarkably, the archaeologists had discovered examples of Nabatean music and literature. Clay tablets with cuneiform inscriptions included what appeared to be songs and poems, while other inscriptions seemed to be contracts, legal documents, and even what might have been early forms of advertising for merchants and craftsmen. As the morning progressed, Prince William was taken to the railway station that had served the old Hejaz Railway, the Ottoman-era train line that had connected Damascus to Medina. This site provided a fascinating contrast to the ancient Nabatean remains. Here was evidence of another great transportation network that had passed through AlUla, this time in the early 20th century. The prince learned that Lawrence of Arabia had actually passed through this very station during his campaigns in World War I. The railway had been a crucial supply line for Ottoman forces, and its destruction by Arab irregular forces had been a key element in the British-supported Arab revolt. Standing on the platform where Lawrence might once have stood, Prince William found himself contemplating the layers of history that existed in this remarkable place. Al-Rashid joined the group at the railway station to discuss the broader historical context of AlUla's role as a transportation hub. He explained that the region's geography had made it a natural stopping point for travelers throughout history. The availability of water from natural springs, the protection offered by the surrounding cliffs, and the strategic location at the intersection of several trade routes had made AlUla continuously important for thousands of years. The Saudi archaeologist also discussed the challenges of preserving sites like AlUla in the modern world. Climate change was beginning to affect even this extremely dry region, with occasional flash floods and changing weather patterns threatening sites that had been stable for millennia. Additionally, the increasing development of tourism infrastructure, while necessary for the local economy, required careful planning to avoid damage to archaeological remains. Prince William was particularly interested in the conservation techniques being used to protect the most fragile artifacts and sites. He was shown how laser scanning technology was being used to create incredibly detailed digital records of tomb facades and inscriptions, ensuring that even if the originals were somehow damaged or destroyed, perfect replicas could be created. This digital preservation work was being done in partnership with universities and museums around the world, creating a truly international effort to preserve AlUla's heritage. The afternoon was spent visiting the old town of AlUla, which had been continuously inhabited until the 1980s. Walking through the narrow streets and abandoned mud brick houses, Prince William could see how traditional Arabian architecture had evolved over the centuries while maintaining its essential character. The old town had been built using the same principles as the ancient Nabatean settlements: thick walls for insulation against the desert heat, flat roofs for collecting rare rainfall, and narrow streets to provide shade and protection from sandstorms. Local guides, many of whom had grown up in the old town before it was abandoned, shared stories that had been passed down through their families for generations. Some of these oral traditions seemed to contain echoes of much older stories, possibly dating back to the Nabatean period or even earlier. Prince William was fascinated by the way that historical memory could be preserved through storytelling, even when written records had been lost. One particularly moving moment came when an elderly local man, Muhammad al-Balawi, shared a story that his grandfather had told him about hidden treasures in the desert. As he spoke, it became clear that he was describing locations that archaeologists had only recently identified as significant sites. The accuracy of the oral tradition in preserving geographical and historical information was remarkable. The prince also had the opportunity to meet with members of the local community who were working to preserve traditional crafts and customs. He watched demonstrations of traditional weaving, metalworking, and pottery-making techniques that had been practiced in the region for centuries. These craftspeople were not just preserving old methods for their historical value, they were adapting traditional techniques to create contemporary artworks that connected ancient heritage with modern Saudi culture. The visit to a traditional Arabic calligraphy workshop was particularly meaningful. The master calligrapher, Ahmed al-Otaibi, showed Prince William how the art of Arabic writing had evolved over the centuries, from the ancient scripts found on Nabatean inscriptions to the classical forms used in Islamic art, to contemporary experimental approaches that pushed the boundaries of the traditional craft. As the second day drew to a close, Prince William participated in a traditional majlis, or council meeting, with local tribal leaders and community elders. This ancient form of consultation and decision-making had been practiced in the Arabian Peninsula for thousands of years, and it provided the prince with insights into Saudi culture that went far beyond what could be learned from official briefings. The discussions in the majlis ranged widely, from practical concerns about tourism development and job creation, to deeper philosophical questions about the balance between preserving tradition and embracing modernity. The tribal leaders spoke with pride about their heritage, but also with realistic understanding of the need to adapt to changing times. One theme that emerged repeatedly in these conversations was the importance of education. Several of the elders spoke passionately about the need to ensure that young Saudis understood and appreciated their cultural heritage, even as they prepared for careers in a rapidly modernizing economy. They saw AlUla not just as a tourist destination, but as an educational resource that could help connect future generations with their roots. Prince William was struck by the sophistication and thoughtfulness of these discussions. The stereotypical image of desert nomads that many Westerners might have expected was quickly dispelled by conversations with highly educated, well-traveled individuals who were deeply engaged with both local traditions and global trends. The evening concluded with a performance of traditional Saudi music and poetry under the stars. The performers, dressed in traditional robes, used instruments that had changed little in centuries: the oud, the rababa, and various forms of drums and percussion. The poetry they recited included both classical Arabic verses and contemporary works that celebrated the beauty and history of the AlUla region. Sitting in the desert darkness, surrounded by the evidence of human civilization stretching back thousands of years, Prince William found himself profoundly moved by the experience. This was not just a diplomatic visit or a cultural exchange. It was a reminder of the deep connections that bound all of humanity together across time and geography. The stars overhead were the same ones that had inspired ancient poets, guided merchant caravans, and witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. The final day of Prince William's transformative journey to AlUla dawned with an unexpected discovery that would fundamentally change the archaeological understanding of the region. Dr. Martinez approached the prince during his morning briefing with barely contained excitement, explaining that the research team had made a breakthrough in deciphering one of the most mysterious inscriptions found at the Jabal Ikma site. Working through the night with advanced imaging technology and consultation with linguistic experts in London and Cairo, the team had finally succeeded in translating a lengthy inscription that appeared to be a detailed account of a diplomatic mission between the Nabatean kingdom and the Roman Empire. The implications were staggering. This was potentially the first direct written evidence of formal diplomatic relations between these two ancient powers, recorded by someone who had actually participated in the negotiations. Prince William listened intently as Dr. Martinez explained the significance of this discovery. The inscription, carved nearly 2,000 years ago, described a Nabatean diplomat's journey to Rome to negotiate trade agreements and territorial boundaries. The level of detail was extraordinary, including descriptions of Roman customs that seemed strange to the Arabian visitor, as well as his impressions of Roman architecture, food, and social practices. What made the discovery even more remarkable was that the inscription also described the diplomat's return journey through AlUla, where he had stopped to record his experiences and observations. He had written about the importance of AlUla as a meeting place where different cultures could come together, trade not just goods but ideas, and learn from each other's traditions and knowledge. As Prince William was led to see the newly translated inscription in person, he couldn't help but reflect on the parallels with his own diplomatic mission. Here was evidence that cultural exchange and international cooperation had been taking place in this very location for millennia, with diplomats from different civilizations working to build understanding and mutual benefit. The morning's archaeological tour took on new significance in light of this discovery. Every site they visited seemed to reinforce the theme of AlUla as a crossroads of civilizations. At the Daydan site, the remains of the ancient city that had served as the capital of the Daydanite and Leonite kingdoms, Prince William saw evidence of a sophisticated urban civilization that had thrived long before the Nabateans. The excavations at Daydan had revealed a complex city with residential areas, commercial districts, religious centers, and administrative buildings. The urban planning was remarkably advanced, with sophisticated water management systems, paved streets, and what appeared to be public buildings designed for community gatherings and civic functions. Dr. Al-Rashid explained that the Daydanites and Lehianites had been masters of desert agriculture, developing innovative irrigation techniques that allowed them to grow crops in the harsh desert environment. Evidence of their agricultural success could still be seen in the carefully engineered terraces and water channels that had been carved into the rocky landscape around the city. Prince William was particularly impressed by the evidence of international connections that the archaeologists had uncovered at Daydan. Pottery fragments from Mesopotamia, jewelry from Egypt, and coins from various Greek city-states showed that this ancient Arabian city had been connected to trade networks that spanned the known world. The religious practices of these ancient peoples also fascinated the prince. The site included numerous carved religious inscriptions and small shrines that provided insights into pre-Islamic Arabian spirituality. These ancient beliefs had incorporated elements from many different traditions, creating syncretic religious practices that reflected the multicultural nature of the region. One of the most moving moments of the day came when Prince William was shown a recently discovered family tomb that had remained sealed for nearly 2,000 years. The archaeologists had used advanced imaging technology to examine the contents without disturbing the burial, revealing intact grave goods that provided unprecedented insights into Nabatean daily life. The tomb contained the remains of what appeared to be a merchant family, a man, woman, and 2 children, who had been buried with an array of personal possessions that told their life story. There were jewelry and clothing that showed their wealth and social status, toys that suggested the children had died young, and personal items that revealed individual personalities and preferences. Dr. Thompson explained that this tomb was particularly significant because it represented ordinary people rather than royalty or high officials. Most of the elaborate tombs at Hegra had been built for the wealthy elite, but this family tomb provided insights into how middle-class Nabateans had lived, worked, and understood their world. The preservation of organic materials in the tomb was extraordinary. Textiles retained their original colors, wooden objects showed no signs of decay, and even food remains were intact. The family had been buried with provisions for the afterlife, including bread, dates, and what appeared to be a form of ancient Arabian perfume. Among the most remarkable discoveries were several scrolls that contained what appeared to be personal letters and business documents. The family patriarch had apparently been involved in the incense trade, and his papers provided detailed information about trade routes, pricing, and business relationships that extended from southern Arabia to the Mediterranean coast. Prince William was deeply moved by the human dimension of these discoveries. Here were real people who had lived, loved, worked, and died in this desert landscape nearly 2,000 years ago, yet their hopes, fears, and daily concerns were remarkably similar to those of people today. The business letters revealed worries about competition, concerns about family members traveling dangerous routes, and pride in successful deals and profitable ventures. The afternoon was dedicated to exploring the broader landscape of AlUla, including sites that were still being excavated and areas where new discoveries were constantly being made. Prince William was taken to a location where ground-penetrating radar had revealed what appeared to be a major settlement that had not yet been excavated. The images showed organized streets, large buildings, and what might be defensive walls, evidence of another significant ancient city waiting to be uncovered. Dr. Martinez explained that the AlUla region probably contained hundreds of archaeological sites that had not yet been properly studied. Each new discovery seemed to reveal more complexity and sophistication in ancient Arabian civilization, challenging previous assumptions about the region's history and importance. The prince also visited a cutting-edge conservation laboratory where artifacts from various sites were being preserved and studied. The facility represented a remarkable collaboration between Saudi institutions and international partners, with experts from around the world working together to unlock the secrets of these ancient civilizations. In the conservation lab, Prince William saw the painstaking work involved in preserving fragile artifacts. Textiles that were nearly 2,000 years old were being carefully cleaned and stabilized. Pottery fragments were being reconstructed to reveal complete vessels, and metal objects were being treated to prevent further corrosion. One of the most fascinating aspects of the conservation work was the use of advanced scientific techniques to analyze ancient materials. Chemical analysis of pigments was revealing information about ancient trade routes and artistic techniques, while DNA analysis of organic materials was providing insights into ancient diet, agriculture, and even population genetics. The international team working in the lab represented one of the most positive aspects of Prince William's visit, the way that archaeological research was bringing together experts from many different countries and cultures, all united by their passion for understanding human history. British, Saudi, American, French, German, and Japanese researchers were working side by side, sharing knowledge and techniques in a true spirit of international cooperation. As the day progressed, Prince William had the opportunity to meet with young Saudi archaeologists who were being trained to continue this important work. These students, many of them from local families, represented the future of archaeological research in the kingdom. Their enthusiasm and dedication were inspiring, and their deep connection to the land and its history brought a unique perspective to their scholarly work. One young archaeologist, Fatima al-Harbi, shared her passion for uncovering the role of women in ancient Arabian society. Her research on grave goods and domestic artifacts was revealing that women in Nabatean society had enjoyed considerably more freedom and status than had previously been understood. The evidence suggested that women had been involved in trade, had owned property, and had played important roles in religious ceremonies. Another student, Omar al-Shahiri, was specializing in the study of ancient Arabian languages and scripts. His work on the thousands of inscriptions found throughout the AlUla region was helping to reconstruct not just the formal written language of these civilizations, but also colloquial speech patterns and regional dialects that had been preserved in graffiti and informal inscriptions. The final major site visit of Prince William's journey was to Elephant Rock, a natural sandstone formation that had become an iconic symbol of AlUla's unique landscape. The massive rock formation, carved by millions of years of wind and water erosion, stood as a testament to the geological forces that had shaped this remarkable region. Standing beneath the towering natural sculpture as the sun began to set on his final day, Prince William reflected on all that he had learned during his visit. The geological time represented by Elephant Rock provided a dramatic backdrop for considering the relatively brief span of human civilization, yet even within that short period, the achievements of the ancient peoples who had lived in this region were truly remarkable. Dr. Al-Rashid joined the prince at Elephant Rock for a final discussion about the future of AlUla and the challenges facing archaeological preservation in the modern world. The Saudi archaeologist spoke passionately about the responsibility that current generations bore for protecting these irreplaceable historical resources for future generations. The conversation touched on the delicate balance between development and preservation, the need for sustainable tourism that could provide economic benefits without damaging archaeological sites, and the importance of international cooperation in protecting world heritage. Prince William was struck by the global nature of these challenges and the need for continued diplomatic and cultural cooperation to address them. As night fell over the AlUla landscape, Prince William participated in a closing ceremony that brought together all of the people he had met during his visit: the international researchers, the local community leaders, the young Saudi archaeologists, and the traditional craftsmen who were keeping ancient skills alive. The ceremony took place by torchlight among the ancient tombs of Hegra, creating an almost mystical atmosphere that seemed to connect past and present. The evening featured presentations of gifts and expressions of mutual respect that embodied the diplomatic purpose of the visit. Prince William received a replica of one of the most beautiful Nabatean inscriptions, translated into English, that spoke of friendship between distant peoples and the importance of hospitality to travelers from foreign lands. In his remarks to the assembled group, Prince William spoke movingly about the experience of the past 3 days and its impact on his understanding of both Saudi Arabian heritage and human history more broadly. He emphasized the shared responsibility that all nations had for preserving archaeological sites and cultural heritage, not just as tourist attractions, but as irreplaceable records of human achievement and creativity. The prince also announced that the British Museum and several British universities would be expanding their partnerships with Saudi institutions to support ongoing research at AlUla and other archaeological sites throughout the kingdom. This commitment to long-term cooperation represented one of the most concrete diplomatic outcomes of the visit. As Prince William prepared to depart AlUla the following morning, he carried with him not just the memories of an extraordinary cultural experience, but a deeper appreciation for the complexity and sophistication of ancient Arabian civilization. The wizard had challenged many of his preconceptions and had given him a new perspective on the historical connections between the Arab world and the broader international community. The final morning brought one last surprise: the discovery of a small inscription that appeared to be a good luck message for travelers. Carved in multiple languages including ancient forms of Arabic, Aramaic, and what appeared to be an early form of Sanskrit. This multilingual blessing, created by some ancient craftsmen for the benefit of passing caravans, seemed to perfectly embody the spirit of cultural exchange and mutual respect that had characterized Prince William's entire visit. Flying over the red sandstone landscape of AlUla, as his aircraft climbed toward cruising altitude, Prince William could see the full scope of the archaeological sites spread across the desert below. The view from above revealed patterns and connections that were not visible from ground-level ancient roads, connecting different settlements, the strategic positioning of cities and towns, and the remarkable way that human settlements had adapted to and worked with the challenging desert environment. The 3-day journey had accomplished far more than its original diplomatic objectives. It had created genuine understanding and appreciation between cultures, had fostered important scholarly collaborations, and had demonstrated the power of cultural heritage to bring people together across differences of nationality, religion, and background. Most importantly, it had shown that the ancient spirit of AlUla, as a place where different peoples could meet, trade, learn from each other, and build mutual respect, was still very much alive in the modern world.